Erin, thank you for having us here today. We're excited to present about some of the work that we've been doing in South Baltimore. My name is Rachel Gadsden, and I'm the development coordinator at the South Baltimore Community Land Trust. So I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about what our organization does, and Jason is going to get more into the details of passive house design. So we have two missions as an organization. The first is housing justice. We work on creating permanently affordable housing opportunities for home ownership, and soon we'll be doing some rental housing. We also do homeowner and renter education. We did a series this last year targeting both, talking about all of the aspects of buying a home and then focusing more on the right side of renters. And then we also do stewardship and community ownership of land. So that is sort of the inherent purpose of a land trust, is to create community control over land that is shared and kept under community ownership in perpetuity, to ward off speculative investment, or in our case, other industrial investments in the neighborhood. So the other part of our work is environmental justice, and we've been doing a lot of community science work and youth leadership development over these last couple of years, especially. We work on the policy change and enforcement side, so working with the city, with the Maryland Department of the Environment, and then during the legislative session, working with other environmental justice advocates to get better legislation in the state to control what polluters can do in residential neighborhoods on our end. And I'll get more into that in a few minutes. And then we also work on community benefits and repair. So the neighborhoods that we work in are very much inundated with polluting facilities. And part of what we advocate for is like community benefits agreements with some of these entities that secure basically benefits to the neighborhoods being impacted that can allow us to do positive development or remediation of polluted sites. So we chose to do passive design for some of our housing development in Curtis Bay. This is a little bit about just what passive design is, but the benefits that we want to secure for our community include creating net zero ready housing, meaning the building is able to produce all of the energy that it needs, and also net positive potential, meaning that owners would be able to sell energy back to the grid when solar panels overproduce. We're concerned about high indoor air quality because of the amount of polluters in the neighborhood, and especially the air quality studies that we've been doing with some of the youth organizers over the last couple of years. We want homes that are sustainable and low maintenance, so we want them to be resilient in the face of environmental change, as we've all been experiencing. And we want to make sure that they end up being low cost to keep up for our homeowners. So we sell our homes to people who are at or below 50% of the area median income. And the last thing we want is for them to then be burdened by housing costs when they are able to purchase. And finally, comfortable temperatures regardless of the season. So again, this has to do with climate change as it's happening, and also keeping energy bills low or zero. So in our communities, I think that the big question that people have when we talk about this is, why would we choose passive? It is currently more expensive to build. There are a lot of things that go into it that Jason's going to get into in a little bit. And it's not the most like straightforward, economic choice when you're thinking about affordable housing. So we're working with housing subsidies from the city and the state, and then we're building homes and selling them at deeply discounted prices so that that subsidy then stays with the home in perpetuity. And owners agree to a limited equity model so that the house can't ever enter the speculative market. But this is why. All of these red triangles here are stationary air pollution sources. These large black and yellow signs are neighborhoods that have been completely polluted out, so they no longer exist. These were residential areas, and now they are completely controlled and owned by industry. This is Curtis Bay. This is about where our passive project actually is. So we are worried about the air quality impacts of this facility in particular, which is the CSX coal terminal, but also all of these other chemical manufacturing and waste incineration, fertilizer industries that are creating toxic air in the community. So this is some of what we hear from residents about what they're worried about. This is black dust all over somebody's window AC unit, all over the sides of people's homes. These are a couple of our youth interns who were working last summer to collect dust samples and try to identify the presence of coal dust throughout the neighborhood and figure out how far it was traveling outside of the city, which is a violation of their permit through the Maryland Department of the Environment. And that right there is the coal pile. And that's just a little closer shot of one of the tape strips that collected dust. So what makes a house passive? I'm going to explain this short part and then let Jason take over with the expertise. But there are 5 basic principles: a thermal bridge-free design, air tightness, ventilation and heat recovery, passive house windows, and thermal insulation. And Jason is going to explain how those things work.
Great, thank you for that, elegant summarization as well, Rachel, on the beginnings of what passive house and the principles behind it and the importance of them, especially in neighborhoods that struggle and are exposed to these levels of toxins in the air and the soil on a much higher proportion in a lower socioeconomic area that creates a level of vulnerability that we're really intrigued on the ability for the home to provide the resistance and the resilience that these communities need and are desperately um, uh, coveting and actually are the perfect candidates for and what Passive House really is focused on is creating an environment of indoor air quality through certain measures of control, and that control comes through air and moisture and thermal dynamics and solar radiation. um, these aspects collect and are controlled through the design process. So, with in regards to the air quality that South Baltimore Community Land Trust is contending with, um, we are focused on the firm, my firm, and the colleagues and cohorts and the team that have collected. That includes Timmy Aziz, who has been our passive house consultant, and we have numerous other engineers from MEP and civil to help us understand the environment and the ways that we can suggest and also design in concepts that take into account the possibilities of making a home as super airtight as possible, so that what it allows happen is to reduce the energy consumption of these homes by 90%. Therefore, uh, subsequently provide, lessening the energy burden on the end user in the community as well. So that ability for being a net positive potential, as Rachel mentioned, happens through the building techniques that are measured, monitored, quantified, and then executed. So there's steps that go along with those certain categories that were listed in the slide before. And one of the things that we look to is to in the modeling process is where we start right here with these form factors and addressing this is 6S, as we like to call it, which is a 6 unit of multi-tenant building structure that is going to be placed on the community land trust site, which was also varianced for higher density. So we already were allowed a higher amount of units on the site than the zoning allotted by going through the variance process. So affordability also is impacted by supply, right? So we needed as many options and available units as possible. So we did densify the site. And then with the particular aspect of where the land trust is the group, these particular sites for the land trust are pretty much centralized to Curtis Bay neighborhood, and they have a couple sites that we're creating um, a series of buildings, a 6 unit that is shown here, and 2 duplexes. One of the duplexes is also was on an existing foundation, so it was considered an adaptive reuse to, even though we had to go through a lot of extensive overhauling to bring it up to compliance. The form modeling process that we see through this is impacted by the lower massing studies that you'll see at the bottom. Those are also trying to address the potential for modularity as well to the scale of um, the necessary square footages in that are demanded of the parameters of like how many bedrooms we're going to have. So in this section, we show some green areas that are indicating a 2 bedroom, two-bedroom unit. The yellow indicates a 3 bedroom unit, and the purple indicates 1 bedroom. And also looking at age in place design components as well. So we'll go through and model these so to understand how much exterior square footage we will have on the outside of the building, understanding versus how much interior square footage we have. That is a form factor. And then we're also addressing how light comes into it, because typically those aspects, those apertures start to play into how much light is entering the space, how much solar gain is coming with that light. Can we control it? Is it shaded? This latest image shows the tree line around the site to better understand if we're bringing on-site renewables, are they going to be blocked by existing tree canopies, or do we need to adjust the building in the conceptual level to account for this? So these things are active live, all of data coming in from the specific site to understand it in its fullest context before making bigger decisions that go into also what is the objectives of the land trust, how are they trying to how many units are they trying to provide, who are they trying to provide them for, and what measures are we giving for not only age in place, but also potential to renovate down the road. So energy goals based on the factors we have, like what really typically boils down to a couple different um, load factors that will increase or decrease dependent on your site, the usage of your building, etc. So we start to understand how the peak seasons, which are shown in the graph above, where you have a baseline and an improve where you're starting to understand, oh, well, we've changed what you can see as a sine wave of heating to cooling loads to a higher, our peak load is just our AC load in that upper right hand corner. That helps us understand how to size the HVAC units, which are already going to be decreased substantially, in sizing, because the fact the building is so passively uh, controlled through thermal, air, and moisture barriers. So a lot of this stuff takes place. We're not supplementing mechanical systems to provide this, because that would increase the energy demand. We're actually looking for the building to be created in a very high quality manner, so that we and modeled to understand how and where you might have condensation, dew points, et cetera, that might become problematic for the indoor air quality and the integrity of the building. So with that, we go through, we understand how that might also play into the workforce as well, and the material choices that we make, what's available. Does the person that's installing it know how to install it, so they're not to void any warranties, to have it installed correctly in sequence. And then testing is taking place at strategic intervals throughout the construction process, where you confirm if the details and the way that the building is constructed is producing the performance levels that you're expected to meet, which is done by a blower door test, which is essentially hooking a large fan to the door, pressurizing the building, understanding how much air leakage it will go out of that building over so much pressure over so much time. So that helps us better understand on the tail end, midstream and tail end, if our building is quantifiably matching what we expect it to out of these models and the steps that we're taking. So we have the continuous envelope with the barriers. The windows and doors are extremely important. Typically, a lot of the heat, the energy is coming from the sun and drives up the cooling loads, which you see in that upper right hand corner. So doors and windows are very important. Mechanical systems, you'll see an ERV, which is an energy recovery ventilator, that in essence is treating the incoming air, filtering the incoming air, but also treating it to pass on its latent heating to match closest to what the indoor air quality is, so that the system doesn't have to compensate drastically for fluctuations in air temperatures. So those are, you know, not these are really low energy intensive systems, and so you also have low maintenance that goes along with that, and hopefully better control over any extraneous costs that might take place for maintenance of these buildings. So they are intended to be low maintenance by nature of the way that we build. So they're all fully electric, and the appliances, I mean, so that we can monitor the demands, we can control that there's no noxious gases that are being produced, and that we can also produce the energy on site and then supplement. Heat pumps and solar panel, well, heat pumps specifically, some water heaters, things like that are the most efficient systems out on the market. They're a critical component of making sure that the building is supporting the end user, but also consuming the least amount of energy. And then which we will try to produce on site through the solar panels. So this is essentially a kind of a very cursory, point by point, in chronological order for the most part, about the steps that are taken and that's the steps working with the land trust as the architect, and on the lead as the design team, to produce the building that in the series of buildings that are there to provide the highest quality, um, uh, low maintenance, uh, in the highest quality indoor air for these patrons. In their all side benefit is also there's huge acoustical qualities that come from building this way. So the sounds of the environment, sirens, etc., things that could cause psychological consequences also are diminished. So the end user also gets a benefit from those things, as well as um, the low cost on energy or no cost on energy. This what we're looking at is a mock-up, which is very critical in the work in the development of the knowledge and skill sets of the workforce to understand if they don't have a lot of familiarity with the practices to make sure that everybody understands how things are constructed in which manner. What we're seeing here is a series of barriers that really encompass how the building works behind on the left. From left to right, you'll see a air barrier, which is a Mentos. It has the double zeros on it. That is a performance barrier. That's our air barrier that would be wrapped around the entire building. Inside of that is ply and also deep pack cellulose, and then another vapor barrier on the other side of that. So there's a series of other thermal barriers and air barriers behind that left side pro client exactly. Thank you, Rachel. Which is shown in this image, which is beginning to be wrapped. And then you can also see how the windows are sealed appropriately, doors, etc. There's also, you can see how the building is insulated on the foundation and actually is continuous. That is very critical to Passive House that that all thermal barriers are unbroken. All details have to be continuous so that there are no breaks and ability for anything that is not expected to happen. Um, this is the exterior bound insulation that helps with thermal bridging. That is attached to the outside air barrier. It also provides an opportunity for furring strips, et cetera, that hold it back, but also allow for siding, facades, et cetera, to be attached to it that provide a cavity and an area for air and moisture to be wicked before it even gets to that thermal barrier. And then what we're seeing here is it's more the finished product. This is the build with 2E, which is a 2 unit. It's actually split where this ladder is placed down the middle. There's a front unit and there's a rear unit. This was on an existing foundation footprint of the existing building when we got the site. That's why it was able to stay in place. The front unit will have, both units will have 2 bedrooms and have a kitchen and living space, and they're split between the two. So that was very important to provide an end quality also that reflects into the neighborhood to say that everybody is deserving of a high quality build that shows well in the sense, and also is the pride is taken in maintaining these buildings. They have to match the effort, to that it will provide the longevity that we want to have these buildings be in place in perpetuity with the land trust, and to provide a very beautiful aesthetic building that people take a lot of pride in. So this is more of the finished product being coming to a wrap on that 2 unit that shows the thermally modified siding as well, which is the wood siding that is a really low impact material that is locally sourced and is a red oak uh, that is sustainably harvested, and no chemicals are added to it in its process of creating its resilience. So I will end it there. Rachel has anything she would like to add on to it, but it's definitely an honor to work with the Land Trust and their vision of understanding that the comprehensiveness and the how everything is interlocked. And a lot of it comes out of necessity of response on their part. But we we are very glad to see examples being realized and think that that is going to show the rest of the communities that also are dealing with similar circumstances that there are avenues to be taken and there are opportunities that are better than current scenarios. And there are people out there striving to make that happen. So we're honored to be a part of that and play a role. And that comes from everybody else on the team as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I kept clicking because I was like, oh, I want to see more pictures,
You
but
were on it, Rachel.
I've
That was
seen all the
great.
pictures.
You hit it on
It's just
point. I would like
exciting.
mentally click in my head, and you were right there. That was so dope. I can't even believe that. I was like we had ESP locked in right there. I was like, it's perfect. Thank you for that. That made it really easy for me.
Yeah. We're yeah, we're just really excited to finish this first duplex and get started on the other 8 units and get people into them. As a side note, we finished our first property on a different site, which is a rebuild of homes that were burned down in a fire. And the fire took out 10 homes and displaced 9 families.
Wow.
We were able to purchase 4 to rebuild and then sell as permanently affordable land trust houses. So we just finished the first one and we are under contract with someone. And it is just the most wonderful experience to know that when we complete these projects, we get to sell brand new homes to people who are working class and might not have the option of entering the housing or the home ownership market through traditional buying. Uh, and we have, price flexibility that differs a lot from speculative or for-profit development. And we don't sacrifice quality to have that flexibility. So this is just a really exciting project. I can't wait to get new owners into this property. And Jason didn't talk more about the site, but there's also going to be a community park on the site, a rain garden that flourishes from the water collected on the roof of this building, or through the downspouts and siding. It won't sit on the roof. That would be a problem. Um, yeah, so it's gonna be a beautiful place to live, and we are lucky that we had Jason's expertise to get through this process, and we just can't wait to have people in the homes. So I'll go ahead and stop the presentation and see if Aaron has any questions.
Sure, absolutely. Actually, if you want to put that last slide back up, maybe with the photo of the home as we're going through,
Sure.
just as some imagery, or if you want to kind of float through some of the photos, that would be great too. But yeah, I do have some questions. Wow, well, congratulations on doing this. This is an amazing project anywhere in the country, but especially in Curtis Bay, where I think it's needed the most. I've done a lot of reading and research on the landscape in Curtis Bay and the CSX terminal and the lawsuits and the explosions and the fact that homeowners in that area uh, rarely open their windows because the outdoor air
Mhm.
quality is so bad. So it sounds like these will actually be the healthiest homes in Maryland, if not in Baltimore City. Is that what you shoot for?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, not as a competition by any means, because we'd love for everyone to have healthy housing. But this is what the circumstances of the neighborhood really demanded, and we wanted to respond to that fully, and not with, I don't know, I think a lot of times we expect people who are lower income, working class, people who work hard to
Mhm.
settle.
Mhm.
And we don't want people to settle. We don't want them to settle for having bad air quality inside or overheating because their windows are 100 years old, like mine probably are. Um, we want people to have the housing that they deserve and that enables them to have the highest quality of life.
I mean, the fact that you know, whether it's defined as workforce housing or affordable housing, however you want to define it, you know, typically in years past, this has been kind of exclusive to the affluent. I mean, put anywhere else, this looks like a luxury home. This looks like,
Yeah.
you know, a 1.2 or 1.5 million dollar home in Northwest DC somewhere. But the fact that like you said to your point, that people who are still, you know, working and striving and living in a community that needs this type of high quality housing and it's affordable. So I guess that leads me to the next question. Is this a rental opportunity that we're looking at, or is this for sale? Would one person own both units and have the second as like an ADU, or are they both rentals? Like, how does that work?
So all of these units will be for sale.
Okay.
So we had to go through a very long process to create condominium agreements for all of these units. Um, but like Jason was saying, for us to build on the existing footprint of the home that was here before, this needed to be a duplex. And we wanted to have two units in there to create more homes, obviously. And these ones are both two bedroom, so a little on the smaller side, but in the 6 unit condo, there will be larger units. So I think we have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units over there. And then there's another duplex that's going to be a little bit bigger than this one. Um, so
So
yeah,
the
they'll all be available for people to purchase who are at or below 50% of the AMI. The purchasing price will be significantly lower than anyone would expect. I think it's going to be around 140, um,
wow.
140, 150. Yeah. So this is how we are able to make subsidies last. So I'm sure you're familiar with more, affordable housing programs that have existed and do exist. But often the subsidies that are built into affordable projects expire, and then they're able to be sold at market rate, which is a waste of the subsidy that we get from, the state and city government. Um, and it doesn't do anything to create like long-term neighborhood resilience.
There's
We don't want to create another opportunity for people to get pushed out, because if we sold this for 140,000 to someone who was low income and they turn around and sell it in a year for 450,000, we've now lost, affordability in the neighborhood. So that's what the land trust model does. It allows us to maintain ownership of the land in a trust while selling the property that is built on top of the land. And then when owners decide they want to resell, the land trust has an option to buy the building back, or they can sell to another person that meets the income qualifications with a slight uptick in price, but the resale formula limits the equity that can be built so that it isn't subject to speculation. It's a percentage based on time rather than whatever the housing market says is now the value of a home.
Will the market rate of the home ever be established just to know? Because you know when I go into the MLS system, and I've got buyers that are looking for healthy, smart, high performance homes, like
Mhm.
there's no button to push to find net zero homes. There is one for a passive house.
Mhm.
There is one for zero energy ready and indoor air plus. But unfortunately, the realtors who aren't very familiar with this type of strategy don't know how to put the appropriate language in there. So these are hard to find. So if somebody I mean, is that something that you all would establish just as a baseline? I know it doesn't matter at the end of the day because of the land trust ecosystem and methodology, but will there be a conventional kind of appraisal when it's done to say, okay, this home really is worth, $800,000 as built, but we're actually selling it for and all the reasons why. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we have to go through appraisals. Uh, and then that factors into like property tax, which is sort of the bigger concern. Some land trusts are able to negotiate agreements with the city where, you acknowledge the market appraisal value, but then base the taxes off of the actual sale value.
Mm,
Um,
hmm
so we'll
hmm
know what the market would appraise the house at, but that won't influence the sale
Right,
price.
right. I
Yeah.
was just curious. Wow, this is absolutely amazing. So, um, are there any future plans for offsite construction methodologies, or do you envision all of this being on-site construction?
So we would love to get into like modular building or prefab for these. Um, we've looked into it for the other 8 units, but right now, and this comes back to a point Jason was bringing up about workforce, right now there aren't any fabricators who can do prefab for this small of a project or that are willing to do it. So that has been one of the major challenges with this is that it is a newer style of building, and we still struggle to find people who have the certifications and the experience and are like interested in doing this as not a luxury home project.
Yeah, urban infill, net zero energy properties built off site are hard to find. I've made many trips to Pennsylvania in search and out to Delaware in search of companies that do it. And so they're there, but it's just, there are challenges and limitations. There's no way around that, unfortunately. And so all of the certified passive house properties there'll be new construction versus retrofit.
For right now, that's what we have in the plans. We're redoing the rebuilds on Hazel Street that I talked about that have had the fire. And those are going to be like fully electric, and they're built with some green building principles, but yeah, we didn't try to do passive modification. Um, I think in the future, the amount that we're able to use passive technology is going to depend on the development of more of a workforce. And there are some programs happening now in Baltimore City even to work on that. And we've gotten a little bit involved um, with some students. Jason, the students at Carver, they've come out to the house and seen the project that we're working on. And I believe they're building doors for passive homes. Um, but yeah, the extent that we'll be able to use this is definitely going to depend on a larger workforce and more availability of materials that can lower the costs.
Yeah, it's tough. Workforce is tough. Finding uh, youth and younger folks that are looking to get into the trades is proving a challenge. On top of the fact that we've got to build 50 to 75,000 homes on the West Coast for all the homes that have unfortunately been caught in the wildfires, which is
Yeah.
going to send a lot of labor out west, and I think material costs will also be infected by that as well. But and I find that, I mean, I've got a youngster, he wants to be an influencer, and he's doing a pretty good job at it. So just finding the workforce, I think, is a challenge in some communities, but I think it's something that when the youth see the technology that's going into this, right,
Yeah.
it's something that I think will really excite them. Um, and so the home that we're looking at on the screen, when will that be completed?
That one should be completed by the end of March.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we're looking at, I think, 5 or 6 weeks left. Um,
Nice, nice.
Praying that everything goes to schedule, but construction is construction. So
Right, right. Any plans for on-site food production?
no, not for this site. I mean, it would be up to the owners. In the condominium agreement that they'll share, there's agreements about the shared outdoor space. Um, and we want to ensure that people have private outdoor space, so there are going to be porches on both sides. I was able to show the porch on one side that's almost complete, but we're not we want to work in a stewardship capacity where we help people to maintain their homes and make sure they have the tools that they need to do that. Make sure that we have a handyman that people can call, and we have a manual explaining everything about how the home works and how to keep things, working to their best of their ability. But we don't want to tell people how they have to live or what to do. It's not like a large enough space for us to create something like a community farm,
Hmm.
but if residents wanted to garden, that'd be great. We'd
Hmm.
love that.
Hmm.
But it's not going to be like a requirement for ownership, you know?
Understood. What other environmental certifications will the property earn other than Passive House? Energy Star, Zero Energy Ready? Will there be EV charging stations?
Jason? That's more of a Jason. I know. So
I
this
mean,
first duplex, we're not actually going through the process of certification. We're doing the passive tests. But since it is the first one and we're all kind of learning as we go, we're not seeking certification for that. But Jason, are the other certifications necessary if a building has passive certification?
because of the stringency of a passive house certification, it typically covers all of the other requirements that are needed to match those other compliance paths, right? So it really does depend on the incentives and the end goal. Like there are aspects that we're addressing right now. I mean, even though, like Rachel said, this we're not going for certification. That for all intents and purposes, this is a passive house because it was treated this exactly the same way, with the exception of filing the paperwork at the end because of the
Costs involved and
well, the cost and time frame, we wanted to control as much as we could while we were learning on the
hmm
first one. And then we
hmm
can deploy that knowledge on the next eight, right? On the
hmm
next 80% of the builds from that initial step. So it really comes down to, I mean, we're doing, you know, cost analysis as well, in addition to looking at, what are the specific criteria of the neighborhood, where it's like some of these other compliance paths, they will get you to a net zero, but they might not. There are trade-offs, like this will control the air quality of the inside, like none of the other compliances, because it's so airtight, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it can be a net zero home without being this, by requirement of it being this airtight, are necessary in all aspects to be a net zero home or a net zero ready home, right? So
Understood.
so there are other compliance paths that might be more applicable, and that comes back to what Rachel was indicating earlier, is like some of the current um not well, limitations in the sense of the areas that could need further growth to make this more readily accessible towards like the labor side, right? Is understanding, getting, and then understanding, is the material choices being selected still matching the end goals of the land trust and the end users, and what environment they're actually in. It gets very contextual at certain levels, but it also is based on just the simplicity of what is this material affordable, and is it readily available, and is it environmentally conscious at the same time? Like those always don't match up, right? So we're kind of trying to navigate that the best way we can in that sense, and making decisions, but new things adapt. So, passive house principles have been around for over 50 years, right? They are essentially kind of this level of scrutiny and stringency and quantifying and measuring is not something that we have in our day-to-day design principles. But it's the requirements are such that it's the pros are starting to outweigh the cons, and I believe that will always be the case. We just have to figure out how to get the other side to match. And by building buildings like this, improving like this can be done. Okay, how else can it be achieved? Maybe for less, and what else needs to take place to 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 do so happens because this is on the ground and physical and can be touched at this point and understood,
So
right?
I'm learning a lot about passive house. I'm still a novice. But would you consider passive house to be more of a design standard or a performance standard?
It's a it's really in a energy um fundamentals kind of standard. It's more about um the design definitely is integrated at the very beginning because the design choices impact greatly how the building is going to absorb energy and produce energy. So, for instance, like this building, we didn't because going back to previously mentioned about the existing footprint, we didn't have the ability to rotate this building, right? We were stuck with its orientation on the site, which happened to be a pretty advantageous site because it still was facing south and it didn't block one unit and didn't block another unit's ability to produce on-site energy through solar panels, right? So, but the other project in the form factor you saw, we specifically located that building to be very much to like the roof structure is specifically at a degree that is best for absorbing light all day. So we just made the roof that slope. So that was a strategy of design to impact the best way to make the cost the lowest that it possibly could be. So the two are hand in hand in most scenarios and have to be to make the product. It's already a level of complexity that a lot of people have to get used to. The design has to be in place to kind of give it logic and rationale so that it kind of brings the whole team together. And then also at the end of it makes a product that the end user can be proud of and want to maintain.
No,
Right.
I love this because
So it's
we spend 90% of our lifetime indoors. And 70% of that time is spent in our homes, 14 to 16 hours per day. And the majority of that time is spent in our bedrooms. So, in an area like a Curtis Bay where there is a lot of, poor outdoor air quality because I think the number I heard was 97% of all the coal from the US comes through that port through CSX. So the fact that we spend so much of our time indoors is another reason why I think this methodology is so critical, especially when we're talking about, high indoor air quality. And so, but I think the other thing too is that a lot of so 70% of the air that we breathe inside of our home comes from outdoors. And I think Passive House cures that. But what about the particle matter and the negative indoor air quality that we as homeowners create inside the property from cooking and toasting bread and candles and incense and those types of things? And so people with respiratory issues that have pets and might have a smoker in the home could negate all the work that's gone into creating a healthy indoor environment. And so, Rachel, I remember you saying that you can't really control how the tenants, or excuse me, how the occupants live, but how do you, because it is a condo, I mean, there are certain things, I guess, that could be written as opposed to a conventional sale, but how do you assure that like 3, 5 years down the road that people are still getting the indoor air quality levels that it was intended? Is that just kind of an education thing, an awareness thing that you'll be talking with the tenants about, especially those that might have respiratory issues about maybe no pets, cleaning materials, those types of things?
So, yeah, I'm glad you asked. So I think part of the work of a land trust is enabling homeowners to be good stewards. Um, like we recognize that we don't own this land. It is in the trust to be preserved for community uses. Um, the homeowners who become land trust homeowners also become members of our board. Um, they become members of the land trust, meaning they will become familiar with our work if they weren't before. They will have a say in what we do and how we do it. There's more to the commitment of owning a land trust home than just being the homeowner. Um, so yes, there are things that can be put in a condo agreement, like no smoking indoors. Um, that feels like an easy one. You know, you can't share walls with people and smoke cigarettes inside. Um, but there are other things that I think are more values based
Mhm.
that we hope to like cultivate with people. How can we collectively maintain the most healthy environment possible? How can we ensure that the effort that went into this house continues to benefit you for years and years, not just the first month after you move in? Um, and I think we just have to believe in people and believe that they value safe, healthy, affordable housing, which we all need. But I went back to this slide because I was hoping Jason could expand a little bit on how the ERV works um, in exchanges indoor and outdoor air to maintain indoor air quality. And like it's part our exhaust the exhaust systems are part of that. So Jason, can you explain
Sure.
a little more?
No, that was great. What Rachel is alluding to it, well, and to answer a little bit more of your question, Aaron, is some of these things are mitigated because we've like mentioned before, is we've taken gas out of the equation, so it's not producing there's no uh,
No combustion. Good.
noxious gases that are being produced inside the space from that fuel source. And then we're very particular about what materials we introduce. Okay, that they don't off gas, low VOC. So we're very conscious minded about what we put in there. Okay, so those two things are really are essential, and then you have the ability to when you educate the end user that you're financially incentivized to do things in a certain way that work with the passive house technologies, is that you're going to see a positive credit on your bill for energy. So that's another motivator that we think will really get people focused on making the best decisions for themselves, and then therefore the home. um and then
Can I interrupt you really quickly?
yeah, please.
I think I agree with everything you just said, and I think even a person moving in with respiratory issues, someone with asthma, let's say, um,
Hmm.
uh, being able to no longer have to use an inhaler, right? No more emergency visits, right? No more overnight stays because of asthma. Like they've moved into the home, and because the air quality is so good, not that it cures their asthma, but it removes the triggers,
Yep.
um, which I think is amazing. Um, but it can't do that if you're smoking in the home and have pets and those types of things. But I think that's where the air quality monitoring comes into place as well, is because oftentimes we as developers and homeowners are sold low to no VOC materials, but then nobody ever kind of validates we're actually got what we paid for, right? And I think that's where sometimes the air quality monitoring can come into play.
Mhm.
Not from necessarily a regulatory perspective, but just giving the occupant that measure of relief that validates that the ERV is working. You're getting your 4 to 6 air changes per hour or whatever it is. When you turn on the hood fan over the stove, it's actually taking the particle matter out, right?
And it's
So
running through that. The ERV has a MERV 13 plus filter in it. So
yeah,
you're
yeah,
automatically getting it. So that we see it like, yeah, monitors are kind of, they're a critical component of validation. They can be purchased subsequently. That I have a couple of them sitting in throughout my house. So you can kind of add them after the fact. We are looking at the potential of like, are any of these case studies, where we could add them in? We've gone down that path with companies that would be interested in DOE specifically. There was a couple grants out there. If we look at monitoring it became more complicated than it was worth because of like what it would take from an agreement perspective, potential invasion of privacy stuff, that we would have to circumnavigate. But we look at it as we know that the ERV does the bulk of the lift as far as assuring that the air coming in is cleaned, it's tempered, and then it's doing the adequate amount of exchanges that are necessary to keep it balanced. And that's critical. So, and that also that is a 99% efficient machine. It's
is
really
that like, well, I think where the sensors would come into play would be, from an on-demand perspective, where the CO2 or the particle matter got out of standard,
Mhm.
that the ERV kicked in at a higher point. I know the ERV is kind of running continuously as opposed to on demand. But I would think that an on-demand type system would reduce the energy cost, but also be able to monitor the air quality and then kind of kick in autonomously, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And having that kind of safeguard is something that can be it's not added in these. This is something that I think is can be circumnavigated with proper education, right? Is like, you'll understand it when you kind of as person uses it, how it should work. And like the land trust is there for education purposes as much as anything to kind of to provide the guidance that is necessary. That's why you don't need, I mean, it is helpful, but I think with the proper uh not oversight, but the proper knowledge up front is
Awareness, yeah.
critical. Yeah, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
that it gives the person the control over, yeah, and we could still add in additional supplement monitors if a person wanted that.
Hmm.
That could be, they could add that. That's
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
that can be client by, or how would I say, end user on a basis of that person. If they, like you said earlier, if they're asthmatic, if they have some sort of respiratory illness that makes them very sensitive to, then I could see the necessity of that. But most should understand it's going to happen regardless. It will be filtered. If it overpowers it, it will be for a very particular reason, and they would know why. That would be able to be, it might be like open a door, get it to clear, and then do it. But if they were super sensitive and very concerned about any kind of measure, then I would say put a monitor would be justified and can still be done at any point.
Well, I have to say I am extremely jealous. I have a MERV 13 filter in my home. But I don't have an ERV. It's just it's the same old recirculating. So I don't know how much my MERV 13 filters doing recirculating old stale air. I mean, the only way I get fresh air in my home is to open the windows. And so we
Mm.
keep our windows cracked. But and our fan over our stove does not vent outdoors. It just recirculates. And so that's why I say I'm very jealous, but very proud and very excited to see what you all have done. I've been into 1630 Hazel Street. I've seen the quality of work that you guys do, which is totally awesome. And I can't wait to do a site visit at this property as well. I just congratulate you on all the work that you've done. I mean, like put this house on your routes and it's a million, it's seven figures easy. And the fact that people that legacy owners in this community can afford to live here, I think is absolutely amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, it has been a great project to be a part of, and I'm excited to have these ones finished and figure out what is our next development going to look like, because we've also been able to purchase some land, an empty lot that we should be able to construct 10 or 11 units on.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Jason, sounds like you're an indoor air quality nerd like me. What's your go-to IAQ monitor? Which one do you go to the most in
Oh, I
what
was
space?
just thinking about what that one was called. It's in the little walnut box that I'm trying to think of. It's called a
This
aware.
one?
Aware? Is it called
This
aware?
one? This one?
No, it comes.
Okay.
It has. Almost looks like a little speaker, but it's about this size.
Yep.
I think it's
Probably
the
aware.
aware.
Yep.
Aware, I think it's called.
Yep.
I have to say that that one's been my go-to. But I mean, I agree with what you're saying about like the ability to. I would love to put as many monitors in this building as somebody is comfortable with, just to learn as much as we can from it. So I appreciate that question, and I'm glad that you're focused in on those things because it's critical. It's almost everything about this building is either the air is either bringing in a toxin or it's bringing in moisture. We want to control both, so it's something that is it's good to be appreciate you bring attention to it and the highlighting this as well. So, it's important for as many people to understand as well as they can to advocate for these types of subsidies and these things that the land trust is that goes after, and then anybody else really is going to have to go if they're going to create affordable, accessible, equitable housing in these neighborhoods. We are outpacing, we're exceeding the market value of in general. That will typically be the case in most underserved neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So it's critical that we bring knowledge to this to understand, like, point being what Rachel brought up that is vital, I think, to the whole conversation is the permanence in subsidies. Is
Mm,
that the money is out there, it's just not spent wisely.
yeah.
So like this is something that provides the value by retaining it, investing it in the right reasons, even though because of the wrong things. That's if that makes sense. It's like this neighborhood shouldn't be exposed to as many pollutants as it is. That shouldn't be a catalyst for why we have to do the right things all
Right.
the time. Is that
Yeah.
because we're the most vulnerable have to step up, and that's unfortunate circumstances. What's important going forward is to say this is all for not, it's not for naught. We should be focused on how these things become affordable is a relative term. It
Hmm.
changes every day,
Right.
to some variable degree, and it's changing. The problem is when it changes too quickly, right? Is what we're kind of dealing with now is this doubling on a 5-year pace. And
Hmm.
that is unsustainable as we can all admit to, right? So um
Well,
this
look, the theme for this year's Baltimore Climate Tech Plus 2025 was healthy, smart, high performance homes, the case for affordability, expansion, and innovation. And we were looking for case studies from our subject matter experts for single family and multifamily homes. You hit it out the ballpark. This is exactly what we were looking for. I know there's other people from around the country that'll be watching this, that'll at least be able to get an indication of it's doable, it can happen. And oh, by the way, it's happening here in Charm City. It's happening here in Baltimore, which I think is dope, to use your term.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to consume any more of your time. You guys have been great. I appreciate it. Please make sure that we get a link to attend the open house when it happens,
Absolutely.
or the ribbon cutting or whatever you have. We want to be there. We want to support your efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Aaron.
much.
All right. Have a great
Pleasure
one.
to be here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.